So we begin tonight's meeting with the land acknowledgement, and we'll be paying it electronically.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships, which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe-Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. But before we move to approve the agenda, there's a change that needs to be made. Under item 6.4 is a delegation by Ricky Viveros and Dorothy Melville, City of Brampton. This delegation has been withdrawn, and instead we have for 6.4 another delegation by Idris Orugu, City of Brampton, who will be delegating on community concerns regarding the board's strategic plan. Can I have one of our trustees move the agenda and a seconder? Thank you, and a seconder. Item number 4, declaration of conflict of interest. Is there any declaration of a conflict of interest? Seeing none, we move to the next item, and that is approval of the minutes. Item number 5.1, minutes of the Curriculum, Equity, and Student Wellbeing Committee that was held on December 8, 2022. Trustee, will you move? And Trustee Promoli, will you please second it? Thank you. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 6 is delegations, and we have a few, in fact, we have 4 delegations today. But before we go to item 6.1, I request General Counsel Ms. Lockyer to give us an overview about the process of delegations. Ms. Lockyer.
Thank you very much. And through you, Madam Chair, when it comes to delegations, the individual group requesting to make a delegation submits their request, and then once they've submitted their request, it's added to the agenda, and they come to present only on the items that they have requested to delegate on. Delegates are limited to 10 minutes to speak. Trustees may, at the end of the delegation, ask clarifying questions only. There is no debate or discussion following the delegation. And after completion of the delegation and any clarifying questions, the trustees have 4 options. The first is to receive the presentation for information. The second is to refer the presentation to another committee for action or information. The third is to refer the presentation to the Director of Education or her designate for follow-up with the delegate by assigned staff. Or 4, request an information report from staff be presented at a subsequent meeting, the date and time to be determined. The actions outlined require a formal recommendation and a majority vote of the committee members in attendance and are subject to final approval by trustees at the following board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockyer. Thank you. 6.1 is a delegation by Rowena Santos, City of Brampton, regarding mental health in schools. And 6.1 also includes a letter by Peter Fay, City of Brampton Club. So can we have the video now, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Regional Councillor Rowena Santos here at City Hall recording a video delegation for the school board meeting today. And the video is actually about our youth mental health motion that we passed just recently at City Council in our chambers just now. And this clip is going to be a summary, and this video delegation is a summary of what happened during those discussions. We are asking for the collaboration together with our school board to address youth mental health issues, which is a crisis in our schools.
Last year, I had to take my daughter out of the public system because they didn't have support, and I moved her into the Catholic system because they did. As of yesterday, I took my other daughter out of the public system, and I'll be moving her into the Catholic system because they have support. When I hear Brampton Minor Lacrosse has a program that they want to bring to the public system free with an Indigenous component, they've gone to the school board. The school board says that they have to go to each individual schools, and then they go to the schools and say that you have to go to and get the okay from the school board. There's confusion. I hear a lot about our staff having good relationships with the school boards and trying to move things forward in terms of the asset side of things, but I also hear some of the difficulty and some of the challenges that we have. We 100% need a better relationship. But I also need to know where's the holdup? Why do I have to remove my children from the public system and put them into the Catholic system? Because I feel like they do have the support, especially for mental health.
We want children to feel comfortable talking about mental health and in groups and individually. So sometimes I know a lot of parents mistakenly mistake symptoms of low appetite or not falling asleep for other health issues, but these are related to mental health issues. And I think we need to bring parents together to bring this awareness. And I think a lot of our children are slipping through the cracks. And how can we deal with this? Thank you.
While we proclaim today is Pink Shirt Day, talking about anti-bullying and the mental health impacts for young people with respect to bullying, today is also Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And as we see an escalation of mental health issues, whether that's eating disorders or self-harm and cutting, or attempts for suicide and depression and anxiety increasing, particularly amongst young women under the age of 14, they become more vulnerable to human trafficking with mental health issues. And so again, as we approach International Women's Day, and also as we see a mental health youth crisis with our youth across the entire country. In fact, it's looping right now on CB24 and on media channels, the various issues that various cities are experiencing with respect to mental health. I think that this motion is timely. I'm going to share that it first started 3 years ago in February of 2020, when a principal from a local school reached out to me and shared a story that there was a student in grade 7 who nearly threw himself over the second floor staircase, and he was a foster child of a double murder suicide. And that prompted myself, Councillor Vicente, as well as Mayor Brown, to host a roundtable discussion. Kathy, you were there, as well as principals, vice principals, staff, and teachers who were all sharing similar stories pre-pandemic. And we were going to take action back then, pre-pandemic, and then in March 2020, COVID hit. And unfortunately, the situation got even worse, because we were already at a very difficult starting point when it came to chronic underfunding and services for our youth, let alone in a world, in a pandemic where they were now isolated at home, away from their friends, and having more and more screen time. A grade 7 student who previously disclosed suicidal ideation and a plan is now disclosing that he researches about specific firearms, mass shootings, and the motives of the shooters. he expresses relating to said motives and sees himself purchasing a firearm in the future and committing a similar act of violence. We are seeing more and more violence in our schools. Just last week, we saw in the Toronto District School Board, there was a shooting that happened at the school itself. Another issue is on gender identity issues. A grade 7 student who identifies to us as non-binary with pronouns they and them, who has not yet been told their parents, disclosed to the school staff that they have been self-harming over the past 2 weeks and displayed multiple deep cuts on their arms and disclosed more on their thighs. This is becoming more and more of a regular occurrence, and I know, looking at your face of concern, it's not just one story, it's completely across the entire city in all of our schools. And unfortunately, because of the chronic underfunding and servicing, our teachers and our principals and vice principals are the ones who are having to deal with these crises. Last week, February 15th, the Peel District School Board hosted an advisory committee group of parents, of which I signed myself up, to help develop a mental health and well-being plan and strategy for specifically the school board. And in that meeting, it was openly discussed that there is a lack of collaboration with other levels of government when it comes to the school board's efforts to deal with mental health and well-being. And so in the motion that is going to be coming forward, we're also going to be talking about the city inserting ourselves in that process so that we could find synergies within the programs that exist in our city in order to help the students in need. But again, the board has to be willing to participate. And I'm not saying the trustees, I'm actually talking about the staff. The board staff have to be willing to cooperate when it comes to this issue and take some serious action. In Algoma University, I spoke to the president, Ozma Vesna, and they are planning to bring forward an Institute for Mental Health and Addictions Research and Training Institute here in Brampton, and are willing to collaborate with the city as well as the school board in order to provide more support and services through that institute. Yeah. So that's some good news and hope at the end of the tunnel as well. Therefore, be it resolved, number one, the city engaged in the following advocacy measures. Mayor, on behalf of council, write letters to the federal and provincial ministers of mental health and addictions, and CC the Peel District School Board and Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board, regional council, and local MPPs and MPs regarding the need for increased mental health funding and support for youth in Brampton. A meeting be scheduled with Minister Tabolo, school board trustees, mayor, and members of council regarding mental health support for youth in Brampton. Council advocates the Peel District School Board to collaborate with the city, region, and social support agencies in order to improve immediate mental health support needs for youth in Brampton. Council advocate to Minister Tabolo and school boards to implement a model of mental health support similar to Upper Grand School Board, where they actually have trained mental health workers allocated to schools, especially for those most in need and in crisis. Council advocate to the region of Peel to enhance communication related to access to the region's community response or situation table so schools can access immediate support for youth in crisis, as mentioned by Councillor Peelschools. A meeting be scheduled with the region of Peel Community Safety and Wellbeing executive leadership members, that's Councillor Peelschools and crew, and the school boards to discuss opportunities for collaboration at the Community Safety and Wellbeing Mental Health and Addictions Action Table. Possible collaboration with the CSWB System Leadership Table, Algoma University, and other relevant stakeholders to host a youth mental health summit or roundtable in Brampton. And number two, the city action the following. Our Community Safety and Wellbeing Office join the Peel District School Board's planning process in the development of their mental health strategy, which, as I mentioned, is happening right now, and also provide an update on Brampton's youth hubs and support/programming related to youth mental health. Brampton is going to have 2 youth hubs. We've spoken to staff about incorporating some mental health support and programming, as well as today there are 2 items on the agenda: exploring Brampton Youth Pass, which is supporting our young people, as well as our youth employment and engagement strategy. So there are a number of things that we can find synergies with the board as they develop their own mental health and well-being plan.
How can we, and I hope that this motion drives that direction to say that we're in this together, whatever we can do to support each other for our children, we need to do. And I know what we're doing at the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, I sit on it. I know what we're doing at the Situation Table, I sit on it. I want a better working relationship.
All members in favor, please stand to be counted.
Thank you so much for your attention for my video delegation today. In summary, we are asking for your collaboration through our schools, through the school board, in order to address immediately the youth mental health crisis in our schools, and also join us in our advocacy efforts so that we can have our fair share of funding. Our City of Brampton staff will be in touch so that we can gauge on the community safety and well-being plan currently underway at the school board.
Okay. We thank Councillor Santos for her presentation. Do trustees have any clarifying questions?
Excuse me, Chair Benjamin. I'm trying to raise my hand, but the button isn't working, and I'd like to speak, please.
Sure. Please go ahead, Ms. McDonald.
Thank you. So I would like to put a motion on the floor that this report is referred to our director and that information come back to this committee with regards to, like, addressing the questions or concerns raised in the delegation.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. Trustee Alves has a question or a clarification.
Yes, so are we able to ask questions about this delegation now, or do we have, is it because Mrs. Trustee McDonald proposed the motion, do we have to vote on that ahead of being able to ask questions?
Ms. Lockyer, I think they only asked only clarifying questions.
Clarifying questions only. Excuse me, clarifying questions only. And as the delegate is not here, I can record the questions and we can send the questions to the delegate, but there isn't an opportunity for those questions to be answered at this meeting because she's not here.
Got it. Okay.
So, Trustee Alves, do you have anything more to add?
No. I guess we'll have to vote on Trustee McDonald's motion. I had a similar thought in that this would be also good to send to our budget committee meeting. But I suppose sending it to the director first isn't. Yeah.
Okay, so the step that we are going to take is we are going to refer this to the director. So all trustees on the committee, are you in favor of this?
Are there any other questions?
Okay, are there any other questions from any other trustees on the committee?
Just need a second.
Yes, through you, Chair. I suppose I would have a question of clarification to be recorded for the delegation. They mentioned talks of support, but I didn't hear what kind of support that meant. So I'd like to know what dollar amount the City of Brampton is proposing. Is that something they are proposing? Is there some financial support coming our way that we're always welcome to accept?
So all those in favor of sending it to the Director of Education, please. All right, noted. Your response has been noted. Thank you, trustees. We now go to item 6.2 on the agenda, and this is a presentation by Laura Zeglin, City of Mississauga, regarding partnering of safe school travel, the Mississauga School Streets Pilot Project. So this also is a video that's going to be played for us.
Actually, I'm here to present, and somebody is going to, I hope, advance.
Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so thanks very much, everyone, for having me here this evening virtually. My name is Laura Zeglin, and I am the Vision Zero program lead at the City of Mississauga, and I'm very excited for the opportunity to share with you about this pilot project that the City of Mississauga undertook last year with the support of the Peel District School Board. And without further ado, someone can advance the slides. I don't have control over them. And thank you. So the school journey is an often overlooked part of our day. It's often seen as something to rush through in between the other important parts of our day. But the reality is when we add up all the travel time across all the times we make this journey, it actually makes up a significant part of our year. And when we make this journey an active one, or walking, riding our bikes, or even driving partway and walking the rest, it has many benefits for our children, from helping prepare their brains to learn, to helping with their growth and development, to even improving their mental health. And these benefits extend to the caregivers walking to the school as well. But the benefits go beyond the individual students. School communities where more families travel by active and sustainable modes, and less families mean less time spent by school staff managing kiss and rides. Efforts to encourage active school travel can be counted as part of your eco-school certification. And importantly, when families have the opportunity to interact face-to-face instead of insulated within their individual vehicles, it creates a sense of connection amongst community members who might not otherwise ever get to meet. Next slide, please. But what do the data say about how students in Peel Region get to school? According to statistics from STOPR, 68% of students in the PDSB live within walking distance of their school. However, survey data from the Transportation Tomorrow survey indicates that travel by car is actually the most prevalent travel mode for school trips, with less than half of those students living within walking distance, regularly walking to school. And two of the main reasons often given by caregivers when asked why they drive to school are convenience and concerns about traffic dangers. So in 2021, the city of Mississauga received a grant to pilot a concept called School Street, which directly challenges our current status quo of prioritizing the convenience for cars as part of the school drop-off and pickup, and instead prioritizes the needs of families traveling by active modes, such as walking, cycling, or traveling by wheelchair. Next slide, please. The School Streets pilot project happened concurrently across 3 Ontario municipalities, with Mississauga being one of them. 880 Cities provided resources and support to the 3 pilot communities, and at the end they wrote a report of the results. And I've included the QR code link to that report on the final slide of my presentation if you're interested in checking it out. Interestingly, in York Region, it was actually the York District School Board that was the lead on the project, not the municipality. Next slide, please. So what exactly is a school street and how does it work? Well, in a nutshell, a school street creates a temporary car-free environment in front of schools during drop-off and pickup periods to prioritize safety for students and families who are traveling by active modes to school. It creates an environment where community members can linger in the space rather than rush. Vulnerable road users are not relegated to the sidewalks. They don't have to worry about traffic dangers in front of the school. And it provides an opportunity to rethink our normal routines. Next slide, please. So our team in Mississauga decided early on that we wanted to work with up to 3 sites to be able to compare and contrast the results across the locations. But we didn't want to work with just any school, so we went through a very detailed selection process involving data collected from STOPR and other partners and discussions with our project advisory group. And in the end, we worked with 2 sites and 3 schools. And the first location was Hillside Public School, located in Ward 2 of Mississauga. Next slide, please. The other 2 schools were located on the same street as each other, a PDSB school and a Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, a couple hundred meters apart from each other. And these 2 schools comprised our second location in Ward 3 of Mississauga, in a very diverse neighborhood of newcomers and English language learners. Next slide, please. So beginning in January of 2022, city staff coordinated local project planning teams for each site of the pilot, including local residents, parents and guardians of children at the school, school board trustees and superintendents, and local high school students. And city staff worked with these teams to plan how the pilot would be implemented in these schools. We also worked with STOPR to ensure that the bus students could still safely get to school. Next slide, please. And I just really wanted to highlight that the Peel District School Board was in this project. You know, beyond just agreeing to have your schools participate in the pilot project, PDSB staff, students, and families played a key role in it. Teachers and other school staff provided direction for the project through the project advisory committees that we set up at each school, including suggestions like providing after-school snacks at the Brian Fleming site to address food insecurity in that community. Teachers also led their classes to act as ambassadors for the project to do data collection, promote active transportation, and plan activities for their peers. Support staff and administrators connected us with high school student volunteers from the community as well, who gave their perspectives on how to make the project one that their parents would be comfortable with. And they also helped plan and run activities within the closure space. At the end of the day, the city provided the funding and the overall coordination of the project, but the local flavor of each of the 2 projects really reflected the contributions of the school staff, students, and families. Next slide, please. In addition to providing an opportunity for city staff and school board stakeholders to work together, the pilot also had some pretty impressive results as it relates to school travel. So across both sites, it was found that school streets were effective at increasing active school travel for school trips and also decreasing driving for school trips. Based on surveys that were conducted in both communities, it was also found that school streets were an effective way to increase awareness of active school travel as an option, as it disrupted the normal routines and created an opportunity for reflection. And after the pilot was complete, public support for the idea increased to a majority being in support of the idea, compared to the other way around before people had a chance to see it in action. Next slide, please. We also sought feedback directly from the students, and they had lots of great things to say about getting to participate in this project, whether as activity planners or just getting to walk or bike on the street before and after school. And at the schools where other students led activities, a lot of the feedback admittedly was about how much fun they had doing the activities. It wasn't all about the active transportation piece, but nevertheless, it was a great opportunity for students to get to experience something novel related to their travel environment and to reflect on their normal travel routines. Next slide, please. So here's a quick snapshot of some of our statistics. At Hillside in particular, we saw a very dramatic decrease in the number of schools around the school site, particularly around the morning drop-off. And this isn't just in front of the school. It was down over 90% in front of the school, but this accounts for the broader school community as well. And at the Brian Fleming site, we also saw a 10% decrease in the number of cars in the afternoon. So not as dramatic, but still impressive results. And at both of the sites, we saw 41% increase in active transportation. And that's not just amongst the students themselves, but all people in the community who we saw walking, riding their bikes, pushing strollers, and things like that. Next slide, please. There were also some great outcomes around student engagement in this project. So we had over 100 elementary school students at the participating schools engaged in the planning and implementation. 72 letters of recommendation that we wrote for students that they could use towards future job applications, volunteer applications, what have you. 19 school travel focused initiatives for students were spurred at the participating schools, and over 1,000 volunteer hours were racked up by the high school student volunteers. There was also an added bonus at the end of the project, with Mississauga's Traffic Safety Council donating an additional $500 to each of the schools after the project had been completed to support efforts to continue to promote active transportation into this school year as well. Next slide, please. So for this slide, sorry, you have to click through to bring up the photos. I put in some animations there. The School Streets pilot has finished, but that doesn't mean that we're done working with schools. So up to 8 schools per year are invited to participate in Mississauga School Walking Week program, which is an annual program that's been running since 2008. And this program provides a celebratory launch event to celebrate students and families who walk or roll to school. It also provides educational activities led by city staff and our partners, resources for schools to promote active school travel in their communities, signed routes marking the routes for students walking, and alerting drivers to watch for students along those routes. It also includes a safety walkabout in the community with opportunities for staff, students, and caregivers to express their safety concerns to the city staff as it relates to the child's route to school. And some of you here I know have already been out to some of these events in your ward, and I hope that you continue to be involved and take part in promoting active transportation with your local schools. And on to my second last slide. Next slide, please. So now it's time to consider the case for continuing school use on a more long-term basis. We saw clear increases in active transportation and decreases in vehicular traffic during the pilot, as well as community building and relationship building between the city, the Peel District School Board, and local communities, when more families had the opportunity to safely walk and roll to school. So the questions I leave you with this evening are, how can we leverage the partnerships and momentum from this project moving forward? And what can the Peel District School Board do as a board to support active school travel? And that's it for me. If you just want to go to my final slide, I've got the link there to the final report by 880 Cities if anyone is interested in taking a look. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Zeglin. Do we have any clarifications from our trustees? We have Trustee Davies. Do you have a question or clarification?
I did. Thank you very much for this great presentation. I've always looked at ways to try and do this. That's always been please send your kids to school, don't take them to school. But when in your slot presentation, when you stated 60% of students live within walking distance, I just wanted for clarification, does your presentation's definition of walking distance align with our policy for walking distance in the age groups?
Yeah, so through the chair, so these were the statistics pulled from the student transportation of Peel Region. So it's how they qualify whether students are eligible for busing or not based on the distance that they walk from school. So that was where I got that statistic from.
Thank you very much for that. I just remember when I was a kid, we used to have meet-up spots. I was just wondering if it has been considered that we have like signs up, say, hey, meet here at 8:15 and we're going to this school and you meet at this intersection. And I do remember, fondly remember walking a little bit out of my way just so I could meet up with certain friends and all walk to school together. And just a thought. I mean, I see bus stop signs and I see all these different signs up everywhere, and just thought, hey, maybe that one might work.
Actually, at one of the schools that we're working with this year, Thornwood Public School, they have something called a walking school bus that one of the teachers has organized, and they meet at a location, and then they can walk into school together. So yeah, it's kind of along the lines of what you're saying. I think it's really cool when schools are able to coordinate those kind of things. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you so much for that.
Trustee Alves, you have a clarification?
Yes, thank you. This information may exist. So I wasn't a elected trustee when this wonderful project was being implemented. So again, congrats again. And I'm definitely proud to represent Ward 3 where one of these pilots is happening and taking place. But I was wondering if does data exist, regarding risk and the traffic impact, kind of, I guess my all-encompassing question is, was the board provided with any of this summary data, or does it exist yet?
So through the chair, I am going to be presenting to Mississauga General Committee of Council later this month, and we put together a report for that, including appendices that really break down the data. So I'd be happy to share that with this board as well if there's interest in doing that. But yeah, it breaks it down. So I just gave kind of the high-level summary today. But yeah.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Is there any other clarification from
Trustee McDonald is asking, has got his hand raised.
Trustee McDonald, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Good to see you, Laura. As you mentioned, Hillside is one of the schools that was part of the study, and I was participated in. It was really great to see all the reduced traffic and everyone engaged. I have, though, the people that were concerned about it the most were the actual people on the street. And I know they've asked me many times, this is a pilot, is this going to be permanent? And I just want to make sure that we state that, if it's just, that was all it was, a pilot.
Yeah, sure. So right now, as I mentioned, there was a lot of human staff resources, time that went into coordinating this. So before we move this into a more permanent program, city staff are taking a look at what would be the most sustainable way of going about it. And that might be that city staff can provide support for individual school communities to run it. We haven't decided anything yet, but at this time, we don't have any particular plans or specific plans to make the pilot permanent, particularly not at Hillside. Yeah.
So through you, Chair, and follow-up question. So what you're saying, there may be a report coming through the city to do that, and when that does, you'll be notifying the school boards of that? Is that through traffic safety or?
Yeah, so through the chair, I'm not sure what the best way of sharing the report would be. I'm open to discussion of the best kind of channels to share it.
Okay. Well, thanks. Thank you very much. It was a great pilot. I know the school community and the parents really enjoyed actually getting out there and walking. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for your support as well.
No problem.
Trustee Alves, you have another clarification.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, in summary, just adding on to Trustee McDonald's note, I would very much appreciate any cost impact analysis that could be shared with the board. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Chair Benjamin. Sorry,
Yes, please go ahead, Trustee
yeah.
McDonald.
Thank you. I have no question. I just want to thank you, Laura. And considering I know personally what you're going through, and for you to actually take the time out to give this delegation, I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, Trustee McDonald is referring to my daughter had surgery today, so we just got home from that. So, but she's fine. Everything is good.
I didn't know if I was
Thank you,
at
Ms.
liberty to say.
Thank you, Ms. Zaylan, for your wonderful presentation, and we hope that this is going to be really successful in the region, and we will all work together.
Thank you very much.
So, trustees, do you want to receive this information? Is it for receipt?
Yes.
Yes? All right.
Thanks.
I think you want to perhaps refer it to the director so that we can coordinate getting the reports back from Mississauga.
Sure.
Okay. So we will refer this to the director, and all those, we need a mover for that and a seconder. Okay. Thank you. Your responses have been noted, trustees. Yes? Okay. Now we have one more delegation, that is 6.4. Oh, sorry, 6.3. We have Tyrone Nimala Kumar, City of Mississauga, who will delegate on active and sustainable school transportation. So, Tyrone, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Tyrone Nimala Kumar. I grew up in Brampton, and now I'm a transportation planner, actually for the City of Brampton. I also volunteer with Bike Brampton, and I sit on the PSART subcommittee. Today, I'm delegating on behalf of the PSARTs to ask that the PDSB adopt an active and sustainable school transportation charter. In doing so, the PDSB can confirm its commitment to student travel, which is safe, healthy, sustainable, and equitable. Next slide. So first off, what is PSARTs? PSARTs is Peel's Safe and Active Routes to School Committee. We're comprised of numerous stakeholders in the region of Peel that want to get kids moving more sustainably, including advocacy groups, municipal governments, the regional government, and most notably, the Peel District School Board itself. Next slide. So all of our members share the same mission, in which Peel will have a safe environment in which the majority of our children and youth regularly use active and sustainable school transportation, or ASST, to and from school. So this includes active transportation, which is human-powered transportation like walking and biking, school busing, and public transportation. Next slide. Unfortunately, that vision isn't reality, and the situation is getting worse. So this data was taken from the Transportation Tomorrow survey. And we can see that the numbers of children walking have been declining steadily since the 80s, as per the red line. So before, over half the students in Peel walked to school. Now it's a third. That decline has been substituted by kids being driven by the parents, represented in blue. Before, only 1 in 10 students were being driven to school, and now 1/3 of students go to school this way. We can't let these trends continue to happen, but right now there's no comprehensive plan in place or mandate to stop this. Next slide. So why does it matter? From a municipal standpoint, I can talk to City Hall about the need to reduce congestion and emissions, but someone who used to use ASST within Peel, the PDSB should care about what students are losing out on. ASST provides numerous benefits, too many to fit on an individual slide. That being said, this subcommittee should probably know a few key benefits. Next slide. So first off, active transportation is linked to school performance and can get kids more prepped and ready to learn in the morning. So this study was done by Dr. Chuck Hillman and shows the difference between students who walked before a test and those who sat before the test. The active group clearly has more brain activity. There are other studies linking physical activity in an active school commute to improve student performance, better cognitive function, and increased attention spans. By encouraging students to walk to school, we allow them to be their best selves within the school environment, all by just changing some simple habits. Next slide. Now, the second benefit relates to mental health. Students had a particularly tough time due to the pandemic, and we are currently undergoing a mental health crisis, as noted by Councillor Santos. And being separated by their friends and stable school environment during that time was rough. Many of us, adults included, took the quote-unquote pandemic walk during the lockdown to relieve ourselves of stress and anxiety, and these benefits are backed by research. Walking, physical activity, and exposure to the outdoors has tangible benefits for student mental health, including reducing stress and anxiety while combating depression and increasing confidence. ASST won't be the cure-all for the mental health epidemic, but can be used as a tool by the PDSP. Next slide. So safety is a key aspect of ASST. Though many parents are scared of stranger danger, one of the biggest dangers for students getting to school is just other vehicles. We know that traffic volumes surge around schools during pickup and drop-off time due to these kids being driven, and studies have shown that this traffic is accompanied by dangerous driving behavior. Supporting ASST helps reduce the safety risk by pushing people away from driving their kids and having them to walk. Furthermore, the site planning process is just as critical. On the left side, we can see a new school that's K-5, and it was built without a surrounding neighborhood. On the bottom left is where all the kids live. But for them to access that school, they have to cross a road in which drivers drive from 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. If we incorporate ASST into a PDSP mandate, we can ensure that schools like this are more well-developed and well-integrated into communities. Further to that safety piece, we need to note that emissions don't just affect global climate patterns, but they also affect our health, right? Kiss and rides, created for the comfort of drivers, are placed beside a playground and sometimes even kindergarten areas. And because they all idle there, it increases the level of pollutants within the air, subjecting children to that pollution. By supporting ASST, we can ensure that levels of driving go down so that way students aren't affected by the dangers of both vehicles and the emissions that they create. Next slide. Finally, there's a large equity piece. Research shows that within the DTHA, immigrants, individuals with lower incomes, and racialized students are more likely to walk to school than other folks. In doing so, they're more prone to traffic violence and lack the resources that bus students and driven students are given. Even looking at students as a whole, we can see that most of our transportation resources go to school busing, which is only available to a quarter of all Peel students, as per SOPAR. This leaves 75% of the student body figuring out how they're going to access their education. This high school recently repaved their parking lot. And we can see that that's great. You have to keep up with maintenance and upkeep. But there were some clear opportunities that were missed. We have student bike parking that isn't protected from the elements. So kids, after they're done class, might see that their bikes are all wet. They have to cross large crosswalks. And most importantly, we see that there wasn't a path created from this bus stop to the school's front entrance. By investing in ASST and creating a mandate for ASST, we can ensure that when we plan for these repairs, we incorporate transportation equity into the equation. Next slide. So that's where an active school transportation charter can come in. So throughout all of Ontario, many school boards have adopted charters. Toronto, Hamilton, Waterloo, Ottawa, New York, just to name a few. The boards that we've interviewed use charters as stepping stones to push for greater change, but they're non-binding, which means that schools can set the pace at which that change happens. Next slide. So the Waterloo region has had great success in their works. Although much of their data has been compromised by the school closures during the pandemic, one school dropped their car usage by 20% in 6 months using a variety of fiscal, educational, and policy measures. Overall, they continued with their programs due to the high cost-benefit ratio of implementing ASST measures. Next slide. Ottawa has displayed the same results. They found that their distinct shift to active transportation in schools that were engaged in school travel planning processes versus schools that didn't, as per their annual travel mode survey. They work by sharing resources and materials and relying on community partners, grants, and municipal funds to create a myriad of their programs. Next slide. And finally, the PSP has already been doing this work without a clear mandate to do so. All of these are great initiatives, so that includes updates to stop our website to refer to transportation, not only in terms of school busing, but also with walking and cycling. They help promote the back to school webinar that we produce. They assisted and greatly participated in the School Streets pilot that Laura just talked about. They distribute Winter Walk Month materials on social media. They contribute to education seminars within the classroom, and they also participate within Bike Month, right? All of these are great initiatives, but without a clear mandate within the school board, school staff can't fully commit to ASST initiatives, leaving staff, teachers, and students to their own convictions while they push these projects. Next slide. So our ask of you. We've drafted an ASST charter that I've submitted to the board. You can feel free to use this exact wording or use this charter as you wish. Ultimately, we'd love the PDSB to start their journey on an ASST initiative and confirm their support for safe and equitable student travel with a charter. In doing so, they can push against current trends for the benefit of all students. Next slide. And with that, I'd just like to thank you guys for listening. And that's it.
Thank you, Tyrone. And over to the trustees for any clarification.
Excuse me, Chair Benjamin.
Yes.
Thank you. Is it possible that I'm a member of the PSAT committee, and I'd like to put a motion on the floor that this report is referred to the director, and that information come back, is reported back to the committee on the feasibility of adopting the active and sustainable school transportation charter?
Okay, thank you. Point noted. Trustee Alves, you have some questions?
Yes, one just verification. I was hoping to draft a motion to send us to governance and policy for review before going to the director. Would that make most sense?
Ms. Lockyer?
The motion is on the table from Trustee McDonald. Trustee McDonald, would you consider what Trustee Alves is saying to be an amendment to your motion that you would be content with it going to governance and policy first?
Sure. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so do we have to vote on this or?
Yes, so the Trustee McDonald's moving that it be put to governance and policy, referred to governance and policy committee, and Trustee Alves is seconding that.
So we have a mover and a seconder. Thank you.
There we go.
Any other clarifications that you require?
Yes.
Trustee Davies?
Just a crazy observation, but when I went to school, which was way long ago, I don't recall there being any kissing rides. It has been looked after that the problem is the kissing ride itself, and that having these in the schools is what is causing a lot of the congestions. I mean, we are making it much easier for parents to drive their kids to school. If we kind of stop doing that, that behavior might actually start to decline.
Yes.
I can submit this to the chair.
Yes.
So that is one of the things that can actually push for more people to drive to school. So kissing rides were created because there was a lot of congestion happening around schools. And rather than dealing with that congestion by reducing the amount of drivers, we made it easier for people to drive to schools through that kissing ride because you have more capacity. But of course that isn't great for the reasons that I've mentioned, but also the fact that now you have this much larger parking lot surface that students have to cross to even get to the school building in the first place. And unfortunately, right now, we are pushing for more and more kissing rides in schools. I was trying to figure out who's creating this policy to have kissing rides, and it seems like it's coming from the school board itself. So I haven't looked into the city of Brampton with our planning department to see if that's a necessity from us, but it doesn't seem like it is. If that isn't the case, please let me know, and I will yell at the person at the school, at the city government to make that policy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Davis. Trustee Clark, I will come to you, and then Trustee Alves will go next.
Okay. Whereas the children of families from generationally sustained high levels of income or moderate levels of income are have more energy. They have a more take on life attitude than people who are either racialized or by class or lower income. Don't have are not able to their parents don't have that history of enthusiasm of everyday life. Has there been specific questions asked about how to get people who from like the lower income racialized communities? Because we obviously people who have doctors and like financiers in their family probably don't need the same type of support that somebody who like their family loves their grocery store or maybe a truck driver would. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I can submit this to the chair. There's a variety of resources when it comes to school travel planning and student outreach and school outreach. Specifically, what Laura spoke to, the OAST, the Ontario Active School Travel group, they provide resources year after year, webinars on how we can outreach different marginalized communities. But that being said, the research, at least specific to the GTHA, shows at least more likelihood from these marginalized communities to walk to school. And speaking to my own experiences, my parents were refugees. I used to be low income as a child. We didn't have cars. Yeah. When we did have a car, my dad was the one who got to use it first because he was the breadwinner. And then my mom would follow with him. But that left me and my cousins, who all lived in the same house, to our own devices to get to school, right? So just due to the lack of means, we did it. That being said, it was great. I don't want to make it sound like a struggle story. We walked through schools, we walked through parks, we got baked goods at the end of the day. So it was a pretty great experience for me at the very least. But that is to say, there is an understanding different cultures in different areas of the world to walk to school. But right now we can see more and more recently there is this push to drive to school because the culture is saying that to be a good parent, you have to drive your kids to school. Due to high levels of traffic around schools, you have to drive your kids to school. There is that sort of cultural push for everyone to drive their kids. So, yeah.
Trustee Owen, the next.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Just a couple of comments. I think, I think this is a wonderful initiative, but also, that Kids and Rides can also be great and serve their purpose. And the children that do get driven to school, some of them do come from a ways away. And I think that, the parents that do have those concerns are valid, and they should be, just as equally as accommodated driving in. One specific question I had regarding the ASSD charter. You had a great example of that school that was built in a high-speed area, high traffic area, difficult to access zone, and I think we have a few of these across the PDSB. Are you able to clarify at all how the ASSD deals with those instances where schools are really tough to get to across high traffic, high-speed zones?
Yes. So assuming this is the chair. So the school travel planning process, or the STP process, is something that many schools take once they get these mandates. It is resource intensive, and it's usually a step that's further down the line. But essentially, there's usually a coordinator like one that exists at Waterloo or at Ottawa, where they look over the school, they see what barriers or obstacles there are to getting students to those schools, and then work through that to eventually raise the amounts of kids walking to school. So when you have, for example, that school that exists on Chinguzi, usually we would push to ensure that schools like that aren't placed in such precarious areas. But once those schools do happen, and once those schools are created, we have to find ways around that, right? So whether that be making safer crossings, getting more school crossing guards, creating different programs in place, working with signal timings, having leading pedestrian intervals where students are able to cross before drivers are able to move. Those are all means with which we can address the problem. That being said, there has to be some sort of mandate in place for that process to start up.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much. That was helpful. I appreciate the clarification. I would suppose my only other question would be again through you, Chair. You had mentioned resource intensive to implement some of these. Are we able to have that information come as well with this package to governance? I feel like it might end up having to go to budget, but I think it would probably be good to include. Is that possible?
Oh yeah, 100%. I could drop some packages together from OAST and the other research I've done. And just speaking to that resource intensiveness, the options which a school can do vary from low effort to high resource, but through enacting a charter, which is non-binding, of course I can't force you to make that charter, I can't force to include what's in that charter. You guys can pick for yourself what is feasible, and eventually we can get that movement snowballing to the point where 20 years down the line, the city of Brampton allocates resources and PSP allocates resources so that we can have that support for students.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. It's an exciting time, and I look forward to receiving it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any more clarifications from our trustees? Seeing none, thank you, Taran, for that presentation. And we have already had a motion to refer this presentation to governance. So all in favor? Done. So thank you, trustees. We have one more presentation, one more delegation. That's 6.4 by Idris Orugu, City of Brampton, who will delegate on community concerns regarding the board's strategic plan. This is also a virtual presentation, but is Mr. Urugu on the line? Oh, thank you. Great.
Yes, Mr. Urugu is on the line.
Thank you, Mr. Urugu, and welcome.
Thank you
Go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everybody. The question asked here is if the board is committed to their strategic plan, and this is very concerning to the community, and because we'll have to go back to some of the things that transpired and why we are where we are. I have to take you back to some recent development here, where the community watched in horror as the chair of the board was deliberately misleading the audience when he appeared on the last episode of the agenda, which aired on February the 27th. The episode of that agenda was if the Peel board was ready to lead. The chair was engaged personally in revisionist history, and I thought that was very, very hurtful for the community to watch. And this has led us to asking these questions. As much as most of us have stated that we want to work with the board, but we need to operate in an environment of transparency and not be engaged in revisionist history. I'll go ahead and just bring members of the community and the board to some of the things that transpired, if some of you did not watch it. The first question that was asked of the chair was, why was the school board taken over? The answer given by the chair was that was disingenuous and misleading at best. The school board was not taken over due to the McCriminal case. That was far from it. The board was taken over due to anti-Black racism and the refusal of the board to mediate and embrace the directives of the minister. We have not forgotten all of these things that has happened. And it's important for us to be able, as we move forward, to be able to tell the truth and tell events as they occur. Arlene Huggins' report said there was no hope for mediation, and as a result, the minister was forced to taking over the board. We have not forgotten that. The other questions regarding the second question that was asked, if the chair was in support of the minister taking over, he said he brought the motion. Now, the June 17 motion the chair was talking about was performative at best, because Bruce Rodriguez was already in Peel taking over the school board on the 20th, and there was no way possible for the motion to have been acted upon, because it took months to get Mr. Rodriguez to be the supervisor of Peel. So that particular point was a lie. The motion by the chair was not responsible for the ministry taking over of the board. In Arlene Huggins' report. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Urugu, can I interrupt you, please? We're talking about the strategic plan, and I don't see any mention of a strategic plan that you are going to present to us. And
I will be talking about. Sorry, ma'am. May I explain to you how this is concerned to the strategic plan?
And I hope you know that you have only 10 minutes.
Well, you have interrupted me.
Okay,
you did interrupt me, and I hope I can get back my time. You interrupted me. I was on my way. I did recognize I have 10 minutes.
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that means I'll have 8 more minutes in total. So how this is concerned to the strategic plan, part of the strategic plan itself is recognizing Islamophobia, the presence of Islamophobia in the school board, anti-Black racism, all of the policies that has brought us to this place. So when the chair says publicly that he does not allow certain facts as we know them to be, he is essentially against the current strategic plan. And if I may, he was asked a particular important question regarding the diversity of teachers in school board. And he said, when he was asked the question, it is true that 80% of the student body isn't white in Peel School, and yet 70% of the teachers are. There was somebody else who was there, Mr. Giovanni, said clearly, anti-Black racism and Islamophobia does not change the outcome for students. The folks in Peel are focused on the wrong things, and the superficial diversity change. The core things that is failing, the core things are failing kids, and it's not changing. Changing who the teachers are does not change the math score. Let me tell you how that is in opposition to the current trajectory of the board. When the chair was asked about the statement made by Mr. Giovanni, he said clearly, I totally agree with Jamil. We need to train our teachers, bring people together. But the question asked was if 80% of the student body isn't white and 70% of the teachers are, and Jamil Giovanni took the opportunity to make inflammatory statements that have nothing to do with the board. This is a core aspect of the current strategic direction of the board. So this is the connection I'm trying to make here. So if the chair of the board goes up publicly and is against this, that means it's against the current strategic direction of the board. And this is very concerning.
Once again, I think you're going away from your presentation. I do not see any connection to the strategic plan.
I just explained.
Maybe one or 2 points which you would like to incorporate in the strategic plan, which instead of talking about what has happened at the board level, or because I don't see any connection with that.
So part of the strategic plan, as I alluded to, was one, recognizing that Islamophobia exists in Peel District School Board. That's embedded in the report. Anti-Black racism strategy is part of the strategic plan. Recognizing equality and fairness in the hiring, policy 90 is part of the strategic plan. So if the chair is against this, it means that the strategic plan itself is on shaky grounds at best. So I am giving you aspect of the strategic plan, the current direct trajectory of the board. And if the chair publicly says that he's against hiring teachers who look like the composition of the Peel School Board, essentially he's saying he's against the strategic plan for the board.
Mr. Urugu, let's not go to the chairman because he's not the person who decides the policies. So you did mention a couple of points, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism. We are already moving in that direction. So can we stick to that strategic plan? We would like to hear something more from you on the strategic plan and not about what the chair has been doing.
Well, this is the reason why it's important. The chair appeared on the agenda as the spokesperson for the board. So if he says something, everyone listens. He's representing the board. He did not appear on the agenda on his own recognition. He appeared to defend the board, to present to Ontarians the policies of the board. And he agreed with these statements that I have just read that were said by Jamil Giovanni. And in light of that, it will be a fair assumption to agree that the chair himself is against the current strategic plan. All of these are connected. So if you're telling me what is the connection here, I talked about Islamophobia strategy. I talked about the Center for Indigenous Excellence and Land-Based Learning. I talked about Directive 16, anti-racism policies. These are components of the board's strategic plan. If the chair says he is not in support of it, that puts the question where the board is on this matter. That is the connection.
Thank you.
So,
is there any more that
I still have some time left.
Plan? You have maybe 3 minutes left.
Thank you. So, this is concerning to members of our community because when you look at the composition of Peel, these statements made by the chair goes against the directives, are not in line with the current trajectory of the board, and itself is concerning to members of our community. And it will be well appreciated if the board can clarify this, if the board is still committed to the current strategic plan, And if the chair can retract those statements, it is possible. If our community must work together collaboratively, we have to be honest, we have to be transparent. We cannot be engaged in revisionist history because all of these are misleading. And I'll go ahead and say policy 90, which is this policy to create a process that is fair and equitable, anti-racist, anti-oppressive, transparent, and actively accountable. These are part of the strategic plan to hire teachers based on the demographics so that students can see themselves amongst the teachers. But the chair is against that. In the report, the reviewers, this is part of the review, recognized an absence of demographic diversity among school staff and underrepresentation of teachers of color in the board. This is part of what Jamil was asked, that the chair said he agreed, and he's against this part. So that puts to question the importance of policy 90, of which the board must adhere to. Research has shown that African, Caribbean, Black, and Indigenous students achieve better educational outcomes and have better educational experiences when they have educators who understand the intersectional identities and lived experience. All of these were the things that the chair said he was against. It is important, if our community must move forward, if we must operate on a transparent platform, that the chair retract this and the board answers this question if they are still committed to the current strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Urugu, for your presentation. Any clarifications from the trustees? Seeing none. Ms. Lockyer, do we send it to?
Receive the presentation for information.
All right.
Excuse me. Hi, Suzanne.
Yes.
I'm trying to ask a question. So,
I can't see your hand up. Okay, please go ahead, Ms. Trustee McDonald.
Will the board be responding to the delegation, or is it when you say receipt? Because traditionally, when people delegated, they got a response. Do you need a motion to get a response?
I'm going to ask Ms. Lockyer to respond to this.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, there are 4 options for the trustees to choose. One is the receive the presentation for information, refer the presentation to another committee for action or information, refer the presentation to the Director of Education or designate to follow up with a delegate by assigned staff, or 4, request an information report from staff be presented at a subsequent meeting. Each one of those actions requires a formal recommendation and a majority formal motion and a majority vote of the committee members.
So, trustees, Trustee Al, you have.
I would like to put a motion on the floor to receive this delegation. Thank you.
All in favor? Do we need a seconder for that?
Yes.
A seconder?
Is there anyone online? Seconder?
So Trustee Al, you're putting a motion on the table, and we need a seconder for this.
Okay. I can. Yeah, are we not getting? Do we not have a seconder online? Oh, okay. So we're not receiving it.
There's no option. I'm a little confused because he has asked a question and there's no option to respond to his questions. I don't understand like the 4 options given. Because if somebody asks a question, when we receive it, we just stick it in the agenda and we don't answer the question, we don't reply to the delegation. I'm really confused.
Yes, Trustee Promoli.
I think it would be reasonable to refer this to the director and give the director the opportunity to respond to this delegation.
I will second that motion, Trustee Promoli.
Yeah.
All right. So we will refer this presentation to the Director of Education. All in favor? All right, thank you. So this has been noted. It will be sent to the director. And
sorry, so just to follow up through you, Chair. I suppose my confusion comes, I listened to the delegation and I thought it was more of a comment, but I didn't get a clear question. Idris, thank you for presenting that. Could you please let us know, just so we have a clear question to send to the director, what is the question we're asking?
The question, the premise of the question has to do with the current strategic direction of the board. Since the utterances of the chair was in opposition to the current strategic directive of the board, and I listed some of the composition of the current strategic plan of the board. The question is the board committed to the current strategic plan? If the leader and the chair of the board made remarks that are contrary to the current strategic plan of the board, it needs clarification because the community is confused, because the board is doing something and the chair is doing something different, or he's saying something different.
Got it, through you, Chair. Thank you. So I think I understand clearly. So we're looking for a clarification, and then the question is directly, is the board still committed to that directive? So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Urgo. So with that, we've come to the end of our delegations for this evening. And before I move on to item number 7, that's the staff report, I will request all the presenters to please leave this room because before we go on to our next item on the agenda. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you to all the other presenters too.
So do you want to run that?
All right, let's go on to item number 7, that is staff reports. So on 7.1, we have Superintendent Lisa Hart, who will present a report on initiatives to support education for reconciliation. Ms. Hart.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, good evening. Since November 22nd, the Indigenous Education Team has been based out of Majading Wingushking, the Center for Indigenous Excellence and Land-Based Learning in Caledon. At that time, they have hosted teachers, students, and Indigenous families throughout the board and region. The center has built strong ties with Indigenous rights holders and built capacity for understanding amongst Indigenous and non-Indigenous people through innovative, traditional, and exciting programs. Next slide. As I mentioned, the soft launch occurred on November 22nd. Next slide. There are several programs running at Manjadingan Wingushking right now and in the future that will help students to develop several life skills, connect with culture, and earn credits. There are descriptions of some of the work that has been done thus far. Credit Recovery Fridays. While the vast majority of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students are doing well in Peelschools, we are finding there are a number who are struggling academically for a variety of reasons. These can include displacement from their traditional homeland, learning difficulties, or other reasons that have to do with systemic Indigenous erasure, racism, or colonial educational practices that are ill-suited for the traditional holistic needs of an Indigenous student. To this end, we've developed Credit Recovery Fridays. Working in tandem with the students' home schools, the center will be bringing students together to work not only on completing missing credits, but also foster a sense of well-being and confidence that they can build upon when returning to their home school. Assignments, missing or new, would be supplied by the home school in order to meet the expectations of receiving the credits. A number of staff and volunteers will be running the program. Next slide. You can transition to the next slide too, thank you. Aquaculture Co-op placement. Working with the co-op team and the Peel Food Action Council, the center will become home to an exciting partnership that will see First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students take part in a 4-credit co-op program starting in September 2023. The center will house an aquaponics system, donated through the region of Peel and the Peel Food Action Council, in which students will develop and maintain and harvest all plants and protein produced through the system. In addition, students will develop plants, maintain, and harvest the produce growing in the outside garden at the center. As a design option for the co-op students, they'll develop strategies using principles of the aquaponics room that can be transported to northern communities. Students will develop skills that are tangible and focus on challenging one of the greatest problems facing remote communities, food security. Tales of an Urban Indian is a one-man play put on by Talkis Free Theater in Barrie. This experiential opportunity takes place on a transit bus as students are brought along for the ride with Simon Douglas, a First Nation man, as he travels from Vancouver to his home reserve. Students will see the play and then be able to learn about aspects of residential schools, intergenerational trauma, and the resilience of Indigenous people. The bus will leave from the school and then take a planned route and then drop students back off at their school. Tuesdays and Thursdays with Tabitha takes place at the center with Tabitha Shergold, community member and the Cultural Program Resource Coordinator at the Indigenous Network. Tabitha invites elementary and middle school students into her circle where she uses Anishinaabe pedagogy to teach about Anishinaabe ways of knowing and being. These include discussions around stories, astronomy, and Indigenous relationships with the land. Next slide. Braiding Sweetgrass video series and students simulcast with Monique Grace Smith, author of the young adult version of Robin Wall's bestseller, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. The Indigenous Education team is partnering with multiple departments to develop lessons that will help to foster understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing across a variety of subject disciplines. Each video will be made available to staff in intervals for 7 days. Treaty Words is professional learning that is run by the staff at the center that builds capacity and understanding amongst Peel educators so that they may model what it means to be a treaty person to their students. These treaty responsibilities mean that all treaty people have a deeper understanding of their relationship with the land and every being that resides on it. The professional learning has run a number of times and has been highly reviewed by participants. Tuesdays after school counting on you, Majiding Wingushkin opens its doors on Tuesdays after school for Indigenous students to take part in curriculum mixed with cultural content. The program has seen students come from all over Peel to experience hands-on learning through a number of facilitators, including language and arts. Experiences in the future will include math through reading and the science of Anishinaabe star mapping through storytelling. Lastly, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit student seasonal gatherings. The Indigenous Education team has been hosting student gatherings at the Jack Smythe Field Center, and we are pleased to announce that the new home of these gatherings will be at the center. Indigenous students will be able to spend a day in each season coming together to take part in cultural and traditional teachings given by community members and knowledge keepers. We are excited about what lies ahead and the work centered around the United Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People and the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation reports.
Thank you, Superintendent Hart. So, Ms. Lockyer, this was supposed to be put on the floor, isn't it?
You're okay.
I'm okay, okay. All right. Trustees, do we have any clarifications for Ms. Hart? Go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for the update and for all the incredible work you're doing. I know this is a clarification question, but it's just so, it's powerful to hear, everything that's happening at this new learning center, and I'm so impressed with everything that everyone is doing. This morning I was at an event for International Women's Day, and there was a speaker there, she's the keynote, and she was talking about the importance of representation as harm reduction. And going into tonight, I just, I love hearing everything that we're doing as a board, that you're all doing to make sure that we're helping to improve that and better provide those opportunities. So anyway, not clarification, but thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Trustee Promoli. Do you want to respond to that, Superintendent Hart?
Just want to say thank you, and just thank you to David Babcock, who's here on behalf of the Indigenous Education Team Secondary Resource Teacher.
Any other trustees with any clarification? I do just like to add a comment. At the Oxford conference, which I had attended, we had two speakers from the Indigenous, to represent the Indigenous people, and they were absolutely wonderful. So I have the name of one person, Dr. Paul Cormier. I think he's on the faculty of Lakehead University, and I don't remember the other person, but he, maybe Trustee Bailey remembers. He's a chief of one of the Indigenous communities, and I feel that they are great resources, and we could reach out to them. Maybe Trustee, our chair, David Green, may be able to help you with the information. So just to add to that, and thank you for the presentation. So we have the report here for receipt. Sorry. Yeah, we have the report here for receipt. So we need a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 7.2, which is a presentation on secondary final evaluations 2022-2023 by Superintendent Rosalind Hoppy. Superintendent Hoppy, we are waiting to hear your report.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. You can move to the second slide. For this evening's secondary final evaluations 2022-2023 presentation, I'll be sharing the objective highlights, definitions, and next steps of the report. Next slide. The objective of the report this evening is to provide an overview of secondary assessment and final evaluations for the 2022-2023 school year only in the Peel District School Board. Next slide. Highlights from our current course of action include grade 9 and 10 courses and workplace East level courses will not include examinations for their final evaluation. Grades 11 and 12 courses may include examinations as part of the final evaluations for college, C, mixed, M, or university U courses. And examinations are not worth more than 10% of the final mark. Next slide. Often in discussions around final evaluations, the terms assessment, final evaluations, and examinations are confused. So we are all on the same page. The following definitions are being used to provide clarity. So for assessment, the process of gathering information that accurately reflects how well a student is achieving the curriculum expectations in a grade or course. The primary purpose of assessment is to improve student learning. For final evaluation, 30% of the grade will be based on a final evaluation administered at or towards the end of the course. This evaluation will be based on evidence from one or a combination of the following: an examination of performance, an essay, and or another method of evaluation suitable to course content. And for examinations, the working definition of an examination as defined by the KDSB means a form of testing intended to assess the level of students' knowledge, ability, and or skills of the subject matter and occurs at the end of the course of study. Although examinations include, but are not limited to, in-person, online, take-home, practical, and laboratory examinations, we limit the definition to mean written, in-person, or online examinations. The education landscape has been irrevocably changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is incumbent upon us as educators and the stewards of our children's education to apply what we have learned for their betterment in order to be in line with what we have learned about necessary shifts in teaching and learning. During the pandemic shutdown and transition to remote schooling, secondary teachers have learned additional and effective approaches to assessment in ways that are flexible, differentiated, student-centered, and allow for growth over time by providing multiple entry points for students. We continue this approach into the current year based on the best practices that we have learned and also being responsive to students, namely our youngest learners coming into secondary school coming out of the pandemic. For them, we continue with the practice of assessing students without examinations and return to this practice only for our senior grade 11 and 12 students. The decision made for final evaluations for the current 2022 school year only We are listening to the feedback from all stakeholders and will also be reaching out to various post-secondary institutions to inform our assessment and evaluation strategies for next year. We will make this decision this spring and will inform students, parents, staff, both teaching and administrative, of our direction for September. Our current emphasis on alternative forms of assessment, such as performances, portfolios, research papers, essays, final conferences, and other summative tools, are a holistic and equitable representation of a student's achievement in the overall expectations than what can be demonstrated in a written examination. With the recent change to D-stream courses, all students need the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding regardless of the pathway they choose. In senior courses, where courses are categorized by pathways, the final evaluation plan needs to consider the student's pathway and the required prerequisite skills. Written examinations as part of the overall 30% final evaluation can be an acceptable evaluation tool. Students will have been provided opportunities to develop the skills necessary to demonstrate their learning throughout the semester, leading up to the final evaluation in a manner that may not be best captured in a written examination. The final evaluations, therefore, reflect assessments consistent with how students have been demonstrating learning throughout the semester. These forms of assessment, along with others, and also support the ministry's de-streaming efforts to ensure equitable outcomes for all students in Peel and across the province. Based on final evaluation resources developed for all staff in 2018, staff have access via our assessment and evaluation resources site to resources that teachers are able to use to help them develop final evaluations that allow for tasks that are designed to gather quality evidence for overall expectations in all strands. B, can be designed to ensure that the teacher can triangulate evidence of learning from observations and/or conversations as well as projects. C, can be differentiated to ensure that students feel engaged and provide an element of choice to gather the most accurate evidence of student learning. D, can be directly linked to overarching learning goals and provide student opportunities to demonstrate their learning in a manner consistent with their learning experiences during the course, such as hands-on. And E, allow for greater differentiation based on learning styles, student profiles, individual education plans, or English language proficiency. Additionally, for grade 11 and 12 students who do write exams, by limiting the weight of those exams, we are enabling staff to seek complementary ways to assess students' knowledge. For example, interviews or conferences, inquiry, stations, performance or action-based, or portfolios. Next slide, please. Our next steps include continue our chosen path this year only related to final evaluations for the 2022-23 school year. Continue to listen to our students and monitor their success. Continue to prepare students for current and future academic and mental health success. Continue to promote alternative evaluations to formal, final written examinations that allow students to demonstrate what they know and can do that aligns with their teaching and learning experiences throughout the course. Continue to provide opportunities for students to practice their test taking and exam writing skills so they are equipped to successfully complete their current courses of study and allow them to be prepared for all future pathway assessments and evaluations. Next slide. Continue to provide support for teachers around improving their assessment and evaluation practices. Continue providing professional learning opportunities and resources for educators. We will monitor both credit accumulation and qualitative indicators of success to determine the short-term and medium-term impacts of our actions. The Assessment and Evaluation Committee will continue to build on the work of the secondary assessment leadership team to inform our collective next steps. And we will reach out to post-secondary institutions to engage in conversations about assessment and determine if our current direction is in alignment with their current and future assessment practices. And we will use the upcoming spring 2023 student census as another key metric to inform our efforts. The opportunity to consolidate learning in a more meaningful way will increase the likelihood that students retain the knowledge and skills they have acquired throughout the semester. As we prepare our students to be lifelong learners, we are increasing their opportunities for success. We will continue to listen to stakeholders, which will inform our next steps for next year. We will bring our decisions forward so that way all are made aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoppy. I see Trustee Alves has something. Trustee Pramodi, you go first. And then Trustee Alves.
Thank you.
Then Trustee Davis.
Okay.
So everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for bringing this to us tonight, and also for the work that I know that you've been putting in for quite some time. I know we had a chance to speak earlier this week too about some of the questions that we've been getting from the community, and I'm really grateful to both of you for giving me that time to have that conversation. But again, for everything that you're doing to make sure that we're doing what's best for our students and preparing them to go forward. So I do have some questions. I don't think they'll be a surprise because we've gone over some of them already. I was interested to hear tonight in the update that that going forward there will be plans for community consultation. I was curious what consultation, if any, has happened to this point, if there's been conversations with the community or with educators about this shift in practice, recognizing that at this point the report that we've heard tonight is strictly speaking around this current school year, but that we are looking ahead to how to manage for the years ahead. So I was wondering if there has been any kind of consultation at this point, or if that's something that will begin based on what we're seeing for this current school year.
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. So we have been listening very clearly, closely to our various stakeholders. And so that has been the way that we've been able to receive feedback directly on the steps that we have taken to date. And we will continue to do so to inform what our next steps are going to be. And so it's through listening to those voices that we are now, as you just stated, we are going to be using that to inform what our plans are for next year. So currently, the plan is one for this current school year. And so by gathering that feedback, that will inform our next steps.
Okay, great, thank you. One of the questions that I've had come back this way is why this decision for this year was put in place for grades 9 and 10 instead of just for grade 9. Given that students who are going into grade 11 will be expected to write, we assume, to have some sort of assessment that may include formal examinations in grade 11. And the concern that I've been getting back from parents is that those grade 11 marks start to count for post-secondary applications. So they're worried about what that looks like in terms of preparation as they are going to their later years of high school, and then whatever their path may be after high school also. So that is one of the concerns that's been coming back my way. Is there anything that we can, this is going to sound like operations and I don't intend it to, but are there plans, or can you help us understand what the plans are to help our grade 10 students in this year prepare for the evaluations they may face in grade 11 or grade 12 the year after?
So yeah, it's a very
yeah, I'm so sorry.
So I'll break it down my best for you to address your concerns. So in terms of, I'm going to speak very broadly initially. So in terms of assessments, the assessments that students take are not for the subsequent year. The assessments that students take are for the current year that they are in. So the staff, the teachers are preparing students based on the term work that they are doing to be able to be successful in the assessments that they're going to be engaged in at the end of that semester. So in terms of, and the semantics matter here, so in terms of saying that we are going to prepare students for next year, no, the focus is on preparing students for the current year that they are in. And as such, the different skills that they need that are necessary for them to find success in the current year are what our teachers are working on. And that's what the teachers are preparing the students for in order for them to be able to consolidate and have the best opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of all the material that's been presented to them during the course of the semester. So that's that one piece. In terms of the next part where you're now talking about the assessments for what they're doing to be able to make sure that they're able to find success, the skills are the pieces that are being developed over, regardless of what the course may be. And the opportunities for them to be able to demonstrate that are what the teachers are working towards. So in our current school year, the focus on grade 9 and grade 10 is making sure, again, as I mentioned, that all the pathways represented through de-screening, because that's what we've done in this for this school year for grade 9 and grade 10. All of the students who are in those courses need to have the opportunity to be able to find success. And so by focusing on grades 9 and 10 and providing those opportunities to have multiple ways to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding, there's a greater likelihood that they're going to be able to find success as opposed to what may be the form of just a written exam. So that's the reason as to why it was included grade 10, grade 9 as well as grade 10.
Okay, yeah. And I take those points. I think, just so I'm clear, the expectation would be that in grade 11, then their teachers would be helping them prepare for how to take an exam also. So that's the expectation?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. So for all courses, the goal is to help students find success, right?
Of course, yeah.
Right? So that's
Yeah.
the obvious piece. So by virtue of that, the opportunity to develop the skills for whatever that format is going to be is one that should be embedded from the very beginning and then scaffolded throughout. So that way the students, again, it's not, oh, by the way, you're going to have this particular form of assessment and you've never been exposed to what that is previously.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a good point. The one thing that I think back is, of course, I think we probably all went through exams throughout high school, and they were stressful. And one of the concerns that I'm hearing back from parents and also from educators is the concern that we are that we're waiting until grade 11 for sort of that higher stress, higher stakes type of assessment that many students would be facing, whether they're in university or college after high school or in different parts of the workforce where they are going to be called on to sort of know how to deal with that pressure, but also to prepare for the pressure. So the concern that I'm hearing back from the community, and I can't even tell you how much my phone has just been going off, but their worry is that we're not helping our students start to develop that skill set about how to deal with pressure, how to plan for this type of high pressure situation until later on. And so what they would be looking for and what they've been asking me to report back is giving them that opportunity to actually encounter that stress and know how to prepare for it from a younger age, so that by the time they get to the higher stakes years, that they're not so caught off guard by it. And I can tell you, of course, we've had these last few years, it's been so disruptive for everybody and a huge challenge for everyone in education. And I'm hearing from parents who have university-age students who are in university, and so they're facing exams for the first time, but they also have younger students who are still students with us here at PDSB. And what they're telling me is that their university students are completely unprepared for exams. And they're hearing back from their kids, they don't know that they can finish the year, they don't know how to proceed, and that this is something that is part of their education now, and they just, because they haven't been exposed, they're lost. And of course, that's going to be something that's common for all students across Ontario, across the world, really, because we've all been going through this. So they're all sort of in that together. So there's, I think, sort of that equal footing. But the concerns I'm getting back from parents now, I'm so sorry, this is so long, everyone. But the concerns I'm getting back from parents now is that if we're doing something different here in PDSB, and I don't want to say that we're the only ones, because I understand that there are 5 boards across the province that are doing something different with final assessments at this point. So that we're one of them. Just so everyone knows, I understand it's also Ottawa Carleton, Waterloo, and the 2 Simcoe boards. But the 1 Simcoe board, what they've done is they're still enabling in-class exams. So I don't have more details on that because I haven't been able to find that information. But the concern is that that's 5 boards out of 76, and so that's about 7% of school boards and the students who attend them who are being exposed differently to how these assessments may look later on. So they worry that their kids are not going to be prepared in the same way that students from the other 71 boards or students from outside Ontario or outside Canada will have maybe an advantage that our students don't have. I can't speak to that because we haven't had the chance to sort of see the results of this. There's my very long question. Have we seen any other jurisdictions who have had this in practice for some time that may give us some information, or is this, again, because we're doing this school year, is this sort of something that's on trial sort of everywhere? I'm so sorry, I know that was so long.
No problem. So I'm going to do my best to be able to make
Okay,
sure.
thank you.
It's still the question.
Yeah.
In terms of preparing students, one of the things that we know very clearly is that, and I'm going to state the obvious, the pandemic had a huge impact on everybody in all facets of life and across all sectors of society, including education. We're no different. We know that. And so by virtue of that knowledge and the manner in which we know it has impacted our students, we thought it prudent to be able to allow them the transition into secondary is stressful in and of itself. So you had made reference, and when you were just sharing that, they wanted to make sure that students are exposed to stress so that way they can be prepared for it for later on. I think we have more than enough opportunities for students to be stressed without the added pressure of having to have this one form of assessment be the only way that students may be assessed as part of their demonstration of knowledge and skills for the material that they're going to be learning. As such, we made that decision mindful of our youngest learners coming into high school because we wanted to ensure the greatest likelihood of success for them. We recognize, and again, we're not saying that exams are, bad. We're not saying that by any means. What we were saying is that, and by the course of action that we've taken for this year, coming out of the pandemic, for this year, we wanted to make sure that our students had the greatest likelihood of success possible, the greatest opportunity to be able to, again, demonstrate their best selves in terms of the knowledge and the skills that they've acquired coming into, for coming out of the semester for a particular course. And so when you take a look at that as the backdrop, that's what's informed us in terms of how we decided that we wanted to proceed for this school year. As I just mentioned, in terms of looking at different sources of stress, I think there's many different other areas in which students can and have already unfortunately found, again, many different things that are stressing them out, quote unquote, that we need to address. We already had a delegation talking about the mental health concerns. That's not lost in us either. And so it's factoring all that in as to why we decided to take the action that we did for this current year. However, we are responsive to our students. We are here to ensure that they do succeed. And that's why we're taking the stance to listen. That's why we're taking the stance to be able to now see, based on the decision that we have made, how is that faring? How is that allowing us to be able to, again, prepare them to be successful as they move forward, focusing on their current year, as I just shared beforehand, but also allowing them to be able to find the success in the future years coming along. And it's for that reason why we're not only engaging in this conversation by ourselves, but we're also engaging in the conversation with our post-secondary institutions. We're going to be engaging with some of them to get a sense of what they're doing, because they too had to shift their practices and their assessment practices during the pandemic. They too had to learn different ways in which they're now going to be able to determine what a student knows from what a student doesn't know. So again, that was mentioned, we all have to shift as a result. So we chose to do what we felt was in the best interest of our students to make sure that they have the greatest likelihood for success. Coupled with, as was mentioned beforehand, recognizing that in this environment that we're in with de-streaming, we know that the powerful and the benefits that de-streaming affords all students by virtue, the research is there to support that, to be able to inform how it is that we're now going to be able to teach on a go-forward basis. In doing that, we know there too that having multiple ways to differentiate how students are engaged and how students learn is to their benefit. And by doing this, taking the course of action that we did, it allows for that to be something that is going to be able to come forward in this manner.
Yeah. So much there because I gave you this huge question and that response was very helpful. Thank you. To your point about making sure that we have the opportunity to assess students in different ways and hopefully to better reflect sort of the different ways they may express that option or that knowledge that they're picking up. I mean, if final assessments are about 30% of the grade, then that means that the other 70% would likely be other assignments in class. It may be quizzes, it may be something else. So, I mean, there would, of course, be that opportunity to see if there are other ways that students are able to express and to demonstrate their knowledge too throughout the term. But I take your point that looking at it in the final term assessment and that, it's looking for different options. I have had some parents, many who are new Canadians who started their life here, brought their life here and their family here, who are expressing concerns that they're not like they have a concern about how their students are earning their education, and they've expressed to me this is not what we would have seen. We would have hoped to see a different standard. We want to make sure that our kids know how to that our kids are prepared for the later years. I did part of my degree overseas. I did some of my high school overseas. I taught overseas very briefly. I'm not going to pretend I'm a career teacher. But I hear that and I hear what these parents are saying to me, because this is, again, it's an extraordinary time. We've all been through a lot right across the globe. But there are parents who are very concerned that their students are not getting the preparation that they would like them to have. And there are some people who are wondering if this is going to disadvantage their kids. Again, I don't want to belabor that point, but that is something that's coming back, and they worry that our students here in Peel are not going to be prepared the way that other students across Ontario are going to be prepared. And, given that we do have a community here in Peel with so many diverse perspectives, we want to hear that and make sure that people are not, that they're not concerned about whether they can have confidence in the work that we're doing. Because of course, this is a board that's here to make sure we're doing the best we can for every student. But that is a concern that I'm hearing back. So I don't want to stay on that, but let's see, the exam schedule week. So when we looked at the calendar, and I know we were looking at it last week and we approved next year's calendar, there's a built-in exam week for all the students in secondary. And our parents of grade 9 and 10 students, this is how this first started to come to our attention. They all started calling and saying, why are my kids playing video games all week when they have nothing? They're telling me they don't have exams, their summative assignments are finished, they have nothing to do. I don't want to pitch that we should get rid of those exam days because we need them for the older students, but I'm also hearing from educators that they need that time to be able to mark the many summative assignments that are coming in. So a student who, instead of having final exams, may have summative assignments, may have 12 assignments due at the same time. I can tell you I've heard from students who are finding that to be a different kind of stress, where they're still having to do everything they can to show that they are understanding the knowledge perfectly, but I don't know how we sort of reconcile that to make sure that we are providing our students with the learning time that they need, but not taking away the ability for our teachers to be able to do everything they need to do in terms of the marking, in terms of administering other exams for the older students. But there is a real concern there that there's 2 school weeks in the calendar year where grade 9 and 10 students have nothing to do. And so I don't know how we reconcile that, but I would put that as a question maybe we can follow up on. Knowing that this school year is already, it is what it is, and that's fine. I've been telling parents that when they've reached out on this particular concern. But I think it's something that we should be aware of, regardless of what we're doing for the next school year and the years after that. This is something that people are having some feelings about. So I'm taking up all the time. I'm so sorry, everyone. I just want to make sure I've hit everything here. I did mention that I'm hearing back from students who are finding a different level of anxiety about the number of summative assignments. They're finding that to be a lot. And in the work world, I know I had this conversation with Catherine Locke here too. The work world, of course, is going to give us a lot of things where, maybe we'll have a time when we have a lot of projects at the same time. We'll have a lot that we're called on. But they are finding that challenging in a different way than studying and sitting down and writing the exam and demonstrating the knowledge that way. So I did want to put that forward. I should give up the floor, but the one last thing that I wanted to mention, I'm so sorry. I am hearing a lot from educators who, we have a lot of different courses where students would be assessed better if they, for a drama class, for example, if they may be giving a sketch or writing a play or something like that, something that's different. But then I'm hearing from other educators who are feeling that they're limited by this change. And what they would like to do is be able to have the professional discretion to assess their students in the way that makes the most sense for the course that they've taught and for what they are hoping the students are able to demonstrate. So some of them who, I heard from a history teacher who prefers to see that written exam because they want to know that the student can sit down and make the argument and share the evidence within that sort of format. So this is the ask that I've had back from educators. I've given you far too many asks from the parents, but and I do want to say I can't even tell you how much my phone and my email have been going nuts the last few weeks. And I really do appreciate everyone who has taken the time to reach out to me. I do have parents who are circulating a petition. I don't think they have that finalized yet, but I can pass that on to you if that's useful at all when that's finished. But there are a lot of people who have some very strong feelings, and they would like to know, and I know we're going to make this decision later in the school year, they'd like to know as soon as possible what our plans are for the years going ahead, because they want to use that in their decision making about how, where their kids are going to school. So I do have to pass on that feedback also. But again, thank you so much for all the time you've spent on this and for being so indulgent. I know that we just want to do the best for all of our students, especially after such a challenging time right across the board, and I'm grateful for everyone who's taking this seriously and putting in consideration. And so I am so sorry, everyone.
Trustee Molly, thank you so much. I think we need to Trustee Alves now. It's his turn.
Thank you kindly, Chair. And I'll reiterate the same comments as my colleague, Trustee Promoli, Superintendent Logan, Superintendent Hoppy. Thank you so much for producing this. Excuse me, Associate Director, excuse me. It's been a long day. But I will just, to be explicitly clear, much like my colleague, Trustee Promoli, has had, I have had countless constituents call me expressing immense concern with this policy, and so much so that they're willing to go to a different board should this policy be implemented because of a few key concerns. So I guess I'll start with a couple questions. And regarding the alternate forms of assessment, I'm understanding that those may include take-home projects, cumulative assignments, in-class projects.
Sure.
Does the Peel District School Board currently have policy regulating the use of artificial intelligence to produce organic content?
We do not.
How would we regulate those cumulative assignments now that we know students can create organic content using softwares like ChatGPT, and how would we grade them accurately? The concern I've gotten for parents is that it would artificially inflate our performance of our students.
So through you, Chair, thank you. That's a very powerful question, and I will do my best to try and provide an answer for you that is clear. As much as the development of ChatGPT came out in, if memory serves me correctly, November of 2022, the notion of quote unquote disruptive technology is not new. We as an industry, education as an industry, have constantly faced new challenges. If you all may recall, there was this thing, what was it called, Google, you all, right? Exactly.
Sorry, the what?
Right, exactly, right. So the notion of us being able to, in an instant, gather information and be able to ask somebody or something else for information is not a new one. Similarly, take it back a few years before that, the whole idea of a computer was, again, revolutionary and disruptive to the ways in which everybody thought that education should be. No, you have to go back to your encyclopedia. You have to go to the library and sit down and go to the shelves and go through the stacks, etc. ChatGPT, when you look at it from the perspective of something that should not be feared, but possibly looked at to be understood, so that way we are able to shape our practice differently, is how we are looking at this technology currently. So we do not have a policy that's existing that now says, and I know other jurisdictions in the US, for example, have outright banned it to now say it's not allowed. We are not taking that stance. We are listening, we are learning, and we are aware of its amazing powers in terms of revolutionary being able to put one thing in and having something that come out. But what that speaks to is the need for us to do what we've always done, which is to shift our practice. So what would be required, and what is happening as we speak in the 5 months or so since it's come about, is that we've been listening to and seeing how this technology has been being implemented by students in some nefarious ways and other amazing ways to inform and instruct and be able to help students to be able to learn better, to learn deeper. And we are listening to and learning from that to be able to shift our practice so that way it cannot be looked at as something that we should fear, but can be actually recognized as a tool to be able to further our learning.
Thank you, through you, Chair. A follow-up. So to that note, I will clarify my point. I actually have plans to bring this to curriculum eventually, but I have a review currently happening with the Governance and Policy Board. It is my personal opinion that softwares like this should be included in classrooms and should help students in future, whether it's, to create brainstorming sessions or generate ideas, all of the above. But ChatGPT is just an example. And software such as Quillbot and others have existed for many a year, over 5 years, closer to a decade. And I guess my concern is that we're removing exams, which are an in-person, proctored way of assessing, and substituting them with other forms of assessment that are more easily manipulated without having the tools in place to review them. So I have a major concern there. Additionally, I think that this policy might, and I say this very gently, might, how do I say this? I don't think this policy, I mean, it would be difficult to take this into consideration, but with softwares that do generate organic content, it does exploit and enact an inequality between students, and it isn't equitable because those who can't afford to pay for softwares that are organic and are more difficult to detect by traditional software kind of creates an imbalance to those that can't afford it. And I think that without the structured exam or proctored exam in place, students will exploit this, perhaps. And then my concern is without those softwares in place, how can we move forward without them?
So through you, Chair, I would say, just to clarify, we haven't removed anything, we limited. And so exams, as we already know, as was already stated, are available for students as a means for grade 11 and 12 for this current school year. In terms of the alternative forms that I already mentioned in the report, those still provide viable ways for students to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. Your point is a valid one, yet that exam too can also provide a valid way in terms of a student to sit down and be able to demonstrate in the here and now without the utilization of technology such as ChatGPT to be able to, again, subvert the intent of the student being the one demonstrating the knowledge as opposed to relying on AI. But in terms of all the other forms, the alternative forms, they actually also provide an opportunity for students to be able to demonstrate their knowledge and their understanding in an evaluated manner that is not in that traditional rote form of sitting down and doing an exam. So where we are currently for this school year with the limits that we've put in place around the grade 9 and 10 examination piece, that has allowed those other alternative forms to come more to the fore. And again, to allow students to be able to demonstrate their best selves through the ways that they've had opportunity to demonstrate throughout the course of the semester, and then finally within that final evaluation period.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess my final point would just be, through those forms, that we just don't have it sounds like we just don't have a policy or a tool in place to detect whether or not they've used these softwares, and I fear that the students in grade 9 and 10 currently will be at both the disadvantage and the advantage. The advantage of having the potential for inflated grades and grade point averages as they enter the next year ahead of them, and the disadvantage of not going through a proctored exam structure. And not to belabor the point here, but I've had some parents and students come and call and say, look, having done exams for 4 years in a row and then gone to university, some of these top, academic universities in the world are still at a great disadvantage and feel like they aren't competitive or don't understand or can't handle. My only fear, I suppose, in ending is that this might further exploit that.
So thank you for that. Just as a point of clarification, our students are not receiving inflated marks because of the fact that they've done an alternative form of a final evaluation.
Sorry, maybe I misspoke. I suppose what I'm trying to say is my fear is that by not having this exam, and perhaps in a world where their cumulative assignment is take home, should that exam be produced by artificial intelligence that is undetectable by current softwares available within the PDSB, their mark would be inflated. That's the fear. That's the current gap.
Trustee Davies,
you're
next. Oh, sorry.
Through you, Chair, and to Trustee Elvis, just to clarify that with the final evaluations, it sounded as though what you were conveying, and just to clarify, that many of the assignments that are final evaluations are taken at home. And there's a variety. So there are many that are in class. They also require that students study. I think sometimes there's this notion that only an exam will be the type of an assessment that will require a student to study. There are many other assessments that require students to study. There's many other assessments that are timed. There's many other assessments that have a deadline. All of those things that I think that people are concerned are only associated with an exam. So I just wanted to clarify that and trouble that a little bit, that yes, they're exams and we tend to place a particular value on exams, but there are other forms of assessment that have pieces of what an exam brings, but also provides an opportunity to set up our children for success. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Eddie Logan, and that's your turn.
Just gonna say, thank you kindly, and yeah, totally appreciate that these other assignments do encompass those, avenues of typical exam structure, absolutely. And yes, I just, it's my understanding that, through lockdown browsers and in-person exams, they're just, safe to avoid AI. But yeah, thank you both very much. And you can imagine that this has been incredibly difficult to handle and respond to immediately.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Trustee Alves. Trustee Davies, your turn.
Thank you. So I do want to touch on a little bit of that. You're amazing. You were an amazing superintendent for me, so you know the calls that I get and from the people that I get. I just want to make sure you are involved in the community because you know the calls that I get. And if that's what you're getting from my area, please make a few more calls because I have not had one call in favor of this. I've had multiple against it. And just learning from our history, it's very similar to when we tried to do that, online learning. Again, it was, yes, back in the day, life was wonderful. I was a workplace trainer. I used to get a day off to prepare to train people, and I used to train people in person. That doesn't happen anymore. It's online safety training, it's online orientation, all of it is online. And we delayed online learning and fought against it, but that's what life is. And part of what we do here is prepare people for life. I understand, graduation rates and getting them up, but another part of what we're doing is preparing people for life. And if we don't do it properly, there are implications. I mean, some of the new people I get, I have to mark their online safety training course and stuff like that. They're doing it over and over and over again because they're not used to that learning format. And I'm so afraid that that's what we're doing to people. I mean, I had my own daughter tell me, Dad, you're fighting for like 35 people in the classroom in the high school level. Do you understand that 2 months ago while you were fighting for that in one-on-one, now I'm in a study hall with 300 other students and no interaction with the teacher? How did that fight prepare me for what I need to do now? You absolutely threw me to the wolves. And that's from my own daughter. So I just want to make sure that we are doing the community involvement and we are keeping yes, I want graduation rates up. I absolutely do. But I also, we need that connection to, hey, what are we doing here? Like, we have to prepare them for life. Like, we're not just graduating and send them out in the world. There's no need to respond to any of that you. And I thank you so much. And
Trustee Bailey, your turn.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm a parent of a student in high school in the PDSB. We have lots of children in PDSB that I interact with due to my children and through my work. Over the course of COVID, it was very stressful for them with the assignments. The amount, Trustee Cromoli touched on it, the amount of assignments that were due at the end of the year, cumulative assignments, it was more stressful for them than if they had taken an exam. Not only that, this year, quite a few of them is taking an exam for the first time. The amount of talking them down
for preparing for an exam. It was so stressful for them. Now, instead of learning with a 10% exam in an earlier year, where to them it's not so much, right? But they would have learned how to do it. But coming in at 10%, like coming in at a later year, not knowing how to do it, it's a lot for them, okay? And I'm talking from a student's perspective. This is the feedback I've gotten from students. The amount of mental health issues it's caused, it's not worth it to say, leave it until grade 11. We need to help our students prepare, as Will said, for life. Because if we go at 10%, 10% is not really much. When next year, when they get to university, exams are worth 50%, 40%. What are we setting our students up for? How are we preparing them? Then that's even more stress for them because one, right now they can say, and I've heard students say, I failed it. I failed my exam. It wasn't worth that much, so I'm fine. How are we going to be preparing them at 10%? As a parent, I'm concerned. I'm not only concerned about my child, I'm concerned about all the children that come to my house, that hang around with my children. I'm concerned about all the children that are in our programs, that I have to hear from them how they're stressed about it. One, to do the assignment, the amount of assignments, because that's what's required of them to go to the next grade. But then not being able to prepare for an exam because they don't know how to prepare for an exam. These are life skills that we need to teach our children. I get that you're trying to say it's less stressful for children, but it's not. It's really not. Because we've seen during the COVID, there was no exams. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, I know because my son is in high school. There's no exams. But it was uber stressful. Yes, the fact that they had to be inside and all of that, exacerbated it. But the fact that they were online, all they could have done was study. But still, it was too much for them. Right? I really think that we really need to look at what we're doing and how we setting our children up for future successes with this model. As a parent, I'm concerned, and I keep hearing it from parents. Well, I'm in the same boat with Will. I haven't heard one parent say they're happy about this new model. But I've heard lots of parents say they're not happy about this model. I, as a parent, am not happy with this model. Okay? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Trustee Bailey. Next, we have Trustee Clark.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. Obviously, obviously, like I'm on side with the comments. I feel sorry, but yeah. And if I can just quickly preface this, I have ADHD. I have to deal with I can't memorize things the same way most people do. I have to learn things by absorbing information, and knowledge comes out. So I like the idea, remembering my childhood, my time in school, of not having to write a full exam. But as an adult, I have concerns that how are we going to ensure that our measurement of the child's knowledge throughout the year makes it out of the year? Because exams are at the end of the year, or often, if there's a middle and then a second one at the end. And the end really gives us as far as I know, gives us a solid measurement of what the child or student has, what knowledge and wisdom they've attained and the skills they've learned. So how are we able to, ensure that the knowledge is passed on in the same way that having it, measuring that retainment of the knowledge as an exam would, if my language is not getting really bad, which often it does. My other, let's see here. What are the, are there going to be standards of these non-exam alternatives? Is there any, what information? Yeah, I know I'm giving a big list. Is there data to support this change? Because again, I like the idea of not having to do an exam, maybe a verbal exam, which is what I was able to benefit from at the end of the year, just to make sure I understood most of what I learned throughout the year. Let's see here, let's see. During your presentation, you mentioned that the teachers developed techniques during the lockdown. What were those techniques? If you can share any of those, just bottom line, my concern is, parents are nervous. I'm concerned about the retainment of information through measuring it in an exam. Maybe there could be an alternative to having an exam that isn't high pressure with more time to complete, just something, I know that's not necessarily a question, that's more policy, but, why the change, I guess, and, how is this ultimately going to work?
Thank you for the questions, Chair. So I'll address each of them that you raised. So you mentioned the knowledge. How do we know that the knowledge is going to be passed on? So I'll preface that by saying that by having exams was not a guarantee that a student is automatically going to retain everything that they learned in the course.
Yeah.
So us limiting that in the way that we have for the current year has allowed us to focus on other ways to allow students to be able to demonstrate what it is that they have learned. And it's for that precise reason why we are encouraging alternative forms, because we know, similar to your own experience, students all don't learn in the same way. And I'm quite sure that if you were to think back to the same courses that you were referring to from your own childhood, you experienced a variety of different forms of engagement leading up to what was then summated into one format of a sit-down written exam. We know that that's not the best way. The research has demonstrated that that's not the best way in all instances for students to be able to demonstrate their knowledge. It is a way, and it can be powerful, and it can be able to do that, but it is not the way. And so by emphasizing those other ways, we wanted to increase the likelihood that students, once again, would have a greater opportunity to demonstrate what it is that they have learned. So that's the answer to question number one. For question number two, the standards for alternative exams, the standards remain the same. We have high expectations for all of our students, and the exams that our staff, our teachers create is expected to maintain those high expectations. So because you did not sit down and write it for me, does not mean I'm now lowering the expectation because you've now produced a body of work, may it be a portfolio. Made because, as you said, for your own example, it was a conversation that you were able to now demonstrate your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s orally.
Yeah.
Right. So the standard does not change because the modality has changed. And so the alternative forms of exams, once again, provide us an opportunity, provide the student an opportunity to demonstrate their best self. As opposed to what we do know happens in many cases, and the same stresses that we're referring to, children seize up, and now this is the only way. Had I been able to demonstrate, it's not that I don't know, but is this the only way for me to be able to say that I know something? We're expanding that. Point number 3, in terms of the be able to support, do any data to support the changes. We do have data to support the changes. The data that we were able to draw upon, the data that we are able to draw upon, however, is the same data that still over, because again, I'm not going to go too deep on this, but I do need to state this. We are still operating within an educational system that was developed primarily has lots of vestiges from post-World War II. Okay? So with that being said and done, the data that we have is conflicted because we have a lot of data that says, you know what, this is the good way, this is the best way for us to be able to learn, because there are some students who have demonstrated that they can do very well in that, and they've gone on to obtain great, wonderful things in life. But we also have a lot of data that says, you know what, had I been afforded another opportunity to demonstrate my best self, I would have been able to. And when you do provide those multiple opportunities, that's when students are able to thrive and be able to now be able to find success. And we know success breeds success, and they're able to now move on to the next level. Again, having still not lowered the standard, but been able to better engage, again, to be able to demonstrate. So the data is there to support the course of action that we have chosen to take for this year, but it is not something that you're going to ever find is everybody's going to say any one thing, just like anything, any other decision that is ever made for anything that we do. In terms of the next question, different techniques that were demonstrated during the lockdown. So yes, I can because they were stated in the report, so I'll just review some of them. So for example, some of those other ways were that educators were asking students through interviews and conferences. So as opposed to sitting down and writing, they were able to have interviews and conferences. So the technique to be able to articulate your thoughts, to be able to capture, still again, maintaining standards, being able to demonstrate, that was one example. Having students be able to do inquiries, meaning that you have a particular topic that the student has been able to chance to choose, maybe from a subset from the teacher, and being able to go deeper and then being able to engage in meaningful ways around the demonstration around that particular topic, making sure that various elements that the teacher has highlighted are evident within what it is that they're going deeper, is another way that teachers were able to refine their assessment techniques during the pandemic, because you're not able to do it in a traditional face-to-face in-person manner, or as your typical sit and get type of exam. And I'll just give another final one as an example, which I mentioned beforehand, a portfolio. Being able to gather and curate different examples and demonstrations of the child's knowledge over the course of the semester, and being able to now have that and being able to speak to that. There too were other techniques that staff were able to engage in during the pandemic that lend themselves beautifully to coming out of the pandemic, because again, we have not lowered the standard. The students are still able to demonstrate their best selves in a variety of different ways. So those are some of the techniques that I mentioned that were able to be honed over the pandemic because we were forced to do so. And then your last question, why the change? I stated that part already, but I will reiterate, because we did want to do what was best, knowing that the students are coming out of the pandemic and recognizing the challenge that we're felt, and drawing on the very things that I just mentioned, the refinement of techniques that the staff were able to develop, and being able to now say we don't have to do things this way and only this way, and recognizing again the challenges that were being faced by our students coming in. That was the reason as to why we've chosen the course of action that we've done for this year.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure all of us really appreciate your efforts. Certainly here tonight, and throughout the the year since the pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Trustee Brad McDonald is on the. Trustee
Yes, I do.
McDonald, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been patiently listening to all my great trustee colleagues, bring around the same kind of points, but I think I hope I won't duplicate a lot of the stuff they're saying, but I think it has to be said, because I've had parents not just contact me before all this. They're emailing me saying, I'm listening to what's happening tonight, and they're voicing their concern. I appreciate having this report. I wish we would have had it before the exam period in January when the decision was made. So we could have had this debate much sooner. But I'm going to have some comments, like some along the trustees, similar comments, and then I'm going to ask some very specific questions. I'm a parent and have kids who've gone through the system and in university. So what I think, you know, some trustees said, and eloquently put by, you know, Trustee Bailey, we educate our kids not to just learn about math and science. We prepare them for the next step outside of high school. And for 50% of our graduates, and that's generally, they go to post-secondary education. And there is where they have to do the next kind of courses and evaluation. And my son, who is now in second year university at Guelph, taking arts and the social science, he had exams that were 100% pass and fail. And when you put the stress of that on top of, oh, parents and children or students are working hard to pay $20,000 on the line for those 100% tests, it makes it very difficult that suddenly a student who's never had an exam or has had very little stress because of it suddenly goes into a pressure cooker. And I think it's really important that we set our kids up for success. So I think it's very short-sighted. I've heard it from my parents saying that. I will echo their comments that we eliminate exams in grade 9 and 10. They need to start the process, because what happens in grade 11, the first exam, that's the marks that they then use to go to university. Again, another pressure point in this. So if we start the exams at 9 and slowly work towards it, and, you know, again, bringing personal experience with my youngest in the mental health and going through all the kind of CBT, DBT kind of stuff, stress and dealing with anxiety is the best way to do it. If you are afraid of heights, or if you're afraid of something, you do the slow exposure, which CBT is part of. And that's what the exam process is in high school. Allow our kids to build the confidence and resilience of writing exams, so when they get to the pressure cooker of money, now it's money on the line, that someone's put money to go to university, they're able to deal with it. And until the universities eliminate exams, we shouldn't be eliminating them. And that's my perspective. That's what parents are echoing in their conversations with me. I've also talked to teachers, and this is not, we have no question, I don't think any trustee worries about assessments and how we can assess children and students and find ways to see how they know the subject. And that's the great thing that, you know, teachers do, and that's, you know, we can change that and evaluate how that works. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about exams for students as they move forward. And I talk to teachers about, especially, I'm an engineer, STEM have exams. You can't get away from it. And so we say, well, let's just do a reduced exam in high school and then give them more performative work just before the exam time. Well, they're finding now that, you know, like every action has a reaction. This is the case where, oh, I'll reduce the exam, but give them more performative stuff that the students didn't have before. So now they're becoming actually more overwhelmed. And exams, as much as you say are stressful, they're actually easier to study for and get it done with and move on, a type of thing, rather than do performative kind of work in the classroom and outside. So I really think that we need to really focus on not just what is best for kids today. And yes, we've had COVID, but we're now out of it. What the universities and colleges and trades programs and other places they're going where there is assessment, pressure cookers going on, we have to prepare our students to be resilient, not just to know the subject, but be able to manage the evaluation and stuff that happens on. So I'm going to ask some questions. So I'm trying to listen through all the conversation and boil down the reason. Why are we eliminating exams in the early grades, and why are we reducing it 10%? Am I just hearing that it's COVID, or is it mental health that we're worried about?
So through you, Chair, it's a combination of the two. So as I stated, coming out of the pandemic, so there's the COVID piece, we recognized that many students have had a very challenging educational experience in addition to now having the transition from elementary into secondary. And so by virtue of that, now here's the mental piece, we wanted to make sure that the stress that that particular form of assessment, we already know cause, and that's what everybody's highlighted here already, was not the only determining factor. So that was the reasoning behind our decision.
Okay, so you mentioned you're going to go through an evaluation and bring something in the springtime. So first of all, who are the stakeholders that you are actually talking to?
So all of the various stakeholders, we receive feedback similar to yourselves. We receive feedback from parents, we receive that feedback from students, we receive feedback from staff, we receive feedback now from trustees as well. So we receive feedback from all the various stakeholders within our system, and that's informing us. And we are taking it outside of where we have not received feedback, but we want to engage in conversation. We are going to be going to post-secondary institutions themselves to engage in conversation as well to inform our decision.
So post-secondary people, you said parents, you said students, who is that it?
Students, staff, parents, trustees, and we will be going to post-secondary institutions.
Okay, perfect. And when you said you're going to bring a report in spring, well, spring starts, it's just 2 weeks away. So when abouts are we expected this report that you made this, done the research and bringing the final report of what you're planning on doing moving forward?
So because there are variables beyond their control, because again, for the people that we want, that we have already received, that's already informing our decision currently, as well as where we want to be able to go that will inform our decision, that's beyond our control. So I don't want to give a date that we're now beholden to that I'm not going to be able to stay true to. But our goal is so that way everybody will be informed about what our steps are for the new year, so people can know in advance and they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, so I'm not asking for the actual date. Are we talking before the school year ends in June? Is that the intent?
Yeah, well, yes, definitely, yes.
Okay,
yes,
okay,
yes.
That's all I want to know, so that we can then set up everyone for the new year. Okay, I won't belabor all the comments that we've had. I think everyone's done a very eloquent job of stating their concerns that they've heard from the constituents and brought those to the table. So thank you very much for answering and listening to my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. Next, we have Trustee Cole on the line. Trustee Cole?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, thank
Yes,
you.
yes, we can.
So Trustee McDonald stole some of my questions, but that's okay. I have a couple of more. So from what I'm hearing, this decision was already made for this school year, and I'm just wondering what data you have to provide us for to look at to see why this decision was made in the first place. Do you have any?
So in terms of any actual reports that I'd be able to provide to you, no, I do not have anything that I'd be able to share at this time now.
Can you share it at some point?
I could attempt to do so. Again, the conversations that we've had were, some of them were conversations that were by listening in a similar fashion that you of yourself were able to listen to your constituents. We too were able to listen to various different stakeholders, and that helped inform our decision. So it wasn't quantified and being able to now say that I have X number of conversations over X period. I do not have that. I would be able to report that, no.
Okay. When you say stakeholders, who are the stakeholders?
It would be all of the same people that we had mentioned beforehand. So speaking with some staff, speaking with some students, speaking with some parents, With the except, we did not speak to trustees. We were under ministerial control at that time. So we did not seek any trustee feedback at that point. So those are the other individuals that could help inform our decision at that time.
Excellent. When you say you spoke to, when you say you spoke to some parents, how many parents was that?
I do not have a number. I would not be able to provide that for you.
Oh, that was never recorded, I'm assuming? Or I don't know if I'm wrong.
No, it wasn't. Not like it wasn't.
So it could have been 5, it could have been 1,000.
I do not have any numbers to be able to share.
Okay. Well, I will just very carefully lay out what I've been hearing. And most parents that I've talked to, and I've calculated 117, have told me that they are extremely worried about their children. Number one, because they do feel, to echo what Trustee McDonald has already said, that, you know, at some point, they are going to have to write exams. So whether they're fearful now or if it's anxiety ridden now, at some point in their life, they're going to have to write an exam. Or, hey, if it's abolished completely all the way through university and college and they get to the real work world, you know, I highly doubt that the workforce will say, hey, we'll accommodate you and you won't have to do what everybody else is doing. That's one fear. The second fear that parents are telling me about is when they bring projects home to complete over a week or 2 or whatever it is, it's usually the parents helping the kids with the project. So it's really not a true evaluation of what the kids are capable of or what they've learned. So I really do feel like exams are probably the best option. I mean, they've been done this way for many, many years. In most of our conversations that we've had tonight, it was very rarely mentioned that COVID and anything related to COVID was the reason. So I'm really questioning if this data is supportive because of COVID, or if there's something else going on. I'd really like to see the data. I'll be honest, I'm angry. I think that, you know, there's a lot of questions that we have that haven't been answered. And I really think that, you know, we need to delve deeper into this, because when I'm being told that, you know, the stakeholders, and we've talked to parents, there's no numbers that are being given, there's no percentages, there's literally no data that we can look at and view. And I would like to see that. And I hope, you know, Trustee McDonald made a good point. I really hope we can see that data come forward after the spring. I care about the kids. I care about my kids. I care about their learning, because you know what? This is when it starts. And if they're having anxiety about exams now, when we bring it back, because again, from what I've heard tonight, this is about COVID and anxiety about COVID. So COVID's pretty much, I'm going to make a guess, over. So I would assume that this would probably be over in about maybe 1 to 2 years. The reality is going to hit. And when it hits, it's going to hit hard, because our students are not going to be prepared at all. And that is my biggest concern. And it's 117 parents that I've spoke to concerned. So I'm not trying to come down hard, but I really do have some pressing questions. And I think we really need to see the facts behind this, because I can see this spinning out of control. Thanks.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the comments. The one piece I will just share is that I did make reference to COVID. It's in the report. I opened with that, and I stated that multiple times, that was a very important determining factor in terms of helping us make the decision that we've made. But I thank you for your comments.
Logan, do you have something to say?
Yeah, no,
Please
I
go
just
ahead.
want to just reiterate the fact that we approached this through, again, looking at care and concern, wanting to be able to support students. That was the way that we approached it. And we listened to stakeholders in a variety of ways. There wasn't necessarily a formality around that, but we don't necessarily have a way that we do many of our things, right? So I think it's important for us to recognize that we have multiple ways in which we hear and respond to our public, and that we respond in ways that we do, that we focus on what we've learned, we focus on any informed information, research, and so forth in order to make our decisions. And we're going to be doing that in the same way now, where we've had an opportunity today to hear from you, to hear from what our stakeholders have articulated. We continue to engage in conversations. We also have a staff committee where we have an opportunity to hear from staff as well, and we also hear from students. And so as we take all of this information forward, we will work together to make a decision, and we'll be able to inform all of you and our students and staff and families in terms of what our next steps are for the upcoming school year. And we intend to do that, early spring, so that there's an opportunity for people to understand what the approach is and the direction is going forward. So I hope that helps to clarify things and sort of summarize much of the conversation. Our approach is really to do what's in the best interest of our students, and we thank all of you for sharing your thoughts and concerns, and that will definitely help us as we inform our next steps that we'll be able to share in the spring.
Thank you, AD Logan. I think Trustee Elves, you have something more to add.
Just to be clear, so is there anyone else? Kim Donald?
I think we don't have anybody else.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, given I think all of our feedback here today, and I think we're pretty well all on the similar page of a lot of our concerns, and I think we've all mentioned the same things. I would like to motion that this policy be deferred to the Governance and Policy Committee for review of the assessment policy.
Can we do that, Ms. Lockyer?
Yes, the policy itself, what the report was talking about today was how that policy is implemented. So the policy itself, assessing and evaluating students in elementary and secondary schools, could be referred to the Governance and Policy Committee for review.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoppy, for your presentation.
Seconder.
Second. And thank you. Yeah, I was coming to that. I seconded first.
Okay.
So all of us were.
Yeah, it's.
Okay. All of us seconded. Somebody proposed, somebody seconded. And all in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you very much. Now we have number 8 on the agenda, and that's trustee motions for consideration. Is there any other motions that trustees want to bring forward? Okay. Number 10 on the agenda. No, we don't have. Sorry, there are no motions for considerations. And number 9 is trustee notices of motion. Nothing?
No.
No? All right, thank you very much. And finally, we go on to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. I would like someone to put this on the floor. Trustee Bromoli, and seconded by Trustee Alice, Trustee Clark. Thank you very much to everybody who's been here and for all the hard work that you have done in just making your presentations. We really appreciate that. And have a good night, everybody. Thank you.